Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to be talking about Jacob's success story. This is something I want us to kind of dwell on a little bit, and then we match it with Proverbs so that we see what did Jacob do in terms of cultivating consciousness. What did Jacob do so that he was able to become very cardiognostic, so very tuned in. He mastered himself in such a way that he was able to really zoom in on those farming practices that he did so that he could be able to become the wealthy man that he became eventually after Joseph was born. Welcome again. A warm welcome to you, everybody. My name is Jemima. This is Wisdom and Associates. I appreciate my followers very much. Thank you again for your support. I really appreciate the comments that you guys put in. So please do not feel shy, don't feel awkward. Don't hold back on whatever it is you're thinking. If you have a difference in opinion, I always welcome those. So thank you very much for those that are following and consistently following with this Wisdom and Associates podcast. Well, I've been talking about something around the story of Jacob, and I want us to look at the story of Jacob so that we can match that with the book of Proverbs and we can understand why King Solomon was really emphasizing on the need of working very hard. When King Solomon was talking about working hard, he was not necessarily referring to a person putting in all the physical effort or putting in a lot of intellect or putting in a lot of how can I oh yes, or like let's say a person is gathering all the information that they need, like they go to the search engines or he would read certain books. Okay, he's not talking about being an educated scholar. What King Solomon was referring to when he was referring, I mean, when he mentioned the word working hard in the book of Proverbs, which you see in quite a lot of chapters, he was talking about cultivating cardiognosis. He was talking about cultivating, or rather practicing, the cultivation of consciousness. He was talking about you becoming a practicing mystic. That is what he was talking about. Why? Because there are so many people who work very, very hard every single day. And despite the inputs of what it is they put, whether it is in time, the number of hours or the intellect that they have poured into their work, into their creativity, people still always find themselves falling short in the area of becoming established people. I want to use the word established because I realized prosperity is like a branch. It's like, how can I put it? It is like a branch under the big umbrella of being an established person. When you are an established person, not only are you a prosperous person, but you're a healthy person. You're a person who has relationships, okay? You have networks, you have the social support that you need on top of, or rather in addition to the financial support that you require. If you look at established men and women in the marketplace, okay, not only the government but also in the marketplace, these are people, they are not necessarily just geniuses, if you will, but they are people who also have the social support and the financial support that they need when they need it. Okay, so King Solomon is now encouraging the mentees in the book of Proverbs to be people who are practicing mystics, practicing godly mystics, because as we've discovered in the earlier episodes, that there's the mysticism that you get from, of course, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through Yeshua, his son, and then there's the other alternative mysticisms, the yoga, the New Age, the Buddhism, and Santeria, African tradition mysticism. There are so many alternative mysticism out there. They actually work. Why? Because people who seek after rebel mystics are the people who employ godly people today. But I tend to see it is because my argument is that Christians, we have not been mentored in understanding how to cultivate consciousness. We have not been mentored in the mainstream churches to be practicing mystics, and that is why we are the ones who lag behind in the marketplace. We are educated, but we are not cultivated. We are not trained up in our senses. We're not cardiognostic, so to speak. So we kind of miss out on certain windows of opportunity when they arise. We do not become sensitized enough to be like, hey, this is a window. I can maximize something here. And before you know it, it opens doors for you and you get connected, and obviously your reality becomes very different from what it was before. So we're going to look at Jacob, and then we match that with what I've just talked about concerning Proverbs and working hard or being a practicing mystic, because that is very, very important. In the world today, even in the world back then, educated scholars were many, but the practicing mystics were like now the elect, you can say, fraction out of that population in the earth. And those are the people who now stand out. Those are the people who come up with those genius ideas. They're the ones who become visionaries. They're the ones who actually, like Joseph, Governor Joseph, Jacob's son, work under the Pharaoh because they've been practicing that cultivation of consciousness until now they are the sought after people for counsel in times of crisis. Okay, so Jacob, as I've said in the earlier episode, he was an old person. He was in most likely in his 80s when his son Joseph was born, and he was not anywhere near anything called prosperity for that matter. Laban was his father-in-law, or you could say his father, because he had married Leah and Rachel and also the concubines, and he was able to sire children with them. By the time Joseph was born, he was child number 12. They always mention 12 children, but we know there are 13 kids in total because Dinah was also one of them. I don't know why they didn't consider Dinah worth of a tribe or something. I think maybe because of the patriarchal can you say culture, that's why she was not counted as like a tribe, so to speak. Anyway, not to digress, I've come to see that Jacob, as I've said, was a man who was very desperate. By the time Joseph was born, Jacob was a very desperate shepherd who needed to come up with a strategy that would help him to now become established so that he could now live, okay, and now go to Canaan, the land of promise, and now, live or retire in that place. The story is cited in Genesis chapter 30, verses 25 to 43. And then there's another continuation in Genesis chapter 31, the first 16 verses. But we're going to focus on Genesis 30 from verses 25 to 43. And the story is a beautiful story. Personally, I like it because I resonated with it because I can understand there's a certain group of people like myself. You've reached an age where you're old, and I mean, you're aging obviously, but you're feeling like everything you have done up to that point has never worked, and you're feeling very stranded. You're running out of ideas. You're actually at your wit's end and you don't know what to do. So I think I tend to see why I would resonate a lot with Shepherd Jacob than his son Governor Joseph. By the time Governor Joseph was in power, he was 30. So I mean, that's still young. Okay, but his father, Shepherd Jacob, was a man who was quite old, as I've said, and then he was also a man who wanted to establish himself. I think he was just a human being like any other person, and he wanted to have an inheritance. I think his main concern at that point was, what will I leave for my kids in the event that I die? Because me, I've lived. Now my kids, I don't have anything for them. And Laban is now cheating me out of my wages, and anikata mshahara. Then the minute I do this, he says, oh, now you see, you allowed this sheep to be stolen, or this sheep were attacked by the wild animals, or the sheep became diseased and all that, so now we are going to cut that out of your salary. I think Jacob was just a very frustrated person, because as much as he respected his father-in-law Laban was really taking advantage of him. And Jacob was really prospering this person, but Jacob was not being recognized at all for his shepherding skills and even for the fruit of his labor. It is a very frustrating thing when you work for someone for so long and they do not even acknowledge your efforts in making them become who they are. And I know many of my friends who are watching this, you're working class, you know what I'm talking about. You work so hard, you work overtime. If you're needed to stay extra hours, you're the one who stays behind, you're the one who's chosen and everything. If there are projects, important projects, you're the one who's entrusted with the projects. But when it comes to being rewarded for whatever you have contributed, it is not matching what you have done, basically. So you wonder why you're being overlooked for promotion and all that kind of thing. And I think for Jacob, that is what happened to him. The cousins that he stayed with, lived with, that is Akina Rachel's brothers and Rachel and Leah's brothers, they were prospering as well, remember? And they seemed to be doing very well. And now Jacob is like, hey, miaka imeenda and I don't know what to do. And I have my grown children. Now Joseph has come na sijui kile nitafanya. Okay, because Laban is changing my wages every now and then. So I think with that, Jacob, in his desperation, I think he reached a place. He said, "Apana, I need to do a shepherding business. I need to do a shepherding business, and from this business, I know I will become a very established person. I'll be so established, I'll even now to do my father-in-law, and I will be able to get out of here." Okay, so that is why I really like his story. I really love it. He has been a very underrated and overlooked character. Not so many people prefer Jacob, especially when you're like, who do you want to be like? I'm like, I want to be like Jacob. Nah. Why? Because his life was a life of suffering. By the time he got to Rachel, he had already slept with Leah. Okay, that is not okay. You're like, honestly, really? So anyway, without digressing, anyway, Jacob was in a place where, honestly, hey, if God did not intervene, hey, Jacob angekaa hapo, angeozea hapo na retire hapo with those children. He would have died and said, "Now my children, I'm sorry, I tried my best. Now go and sort yourself." Okay. So anyway, I am of the opinion, I'm of this very strong opinion that Jacob reached a place where he said, "I have to cultivate consciousness. I have to do something. I have to cultivate this cardiognosis so well until whatever it is I will decide to do, whatever I envision to do, it will work. Because I have to live. I can't retire here in Laban's land. I cannot retire as an immigrant." Remember, he was an immigrant, remember? So Jacob reached a place, alisema pana, lazima nifanye biashara, and when I do this business, I will apply certain strategies. I will become an expert in this field, and with that, Laban Laban will not be able now to use this wage carrot thing to dangle in front of me so that he can exploit me, and now I die with nothing. There's this culture where I remember when I was a kid growing up, there are people who used to say, if you work for the Indian, the best thing you live with after it when you're retiring is a wheelbarrow and hopefully a spade and a djembe. That is not something promising to look forward to. As a person who's worked for someone for over 20 years and you don't have a pension, or you're given something so small, you wonder, now hii nitafanya nini nayo? So Jacob, in a sense, he was kind of like in that situation. That's why I like his story very much. And as I've said, Jacob started to practice some kind of mysticism. He started to do it more often, because even, remember, he's in his 80s. He's not in his 30s anymore. So he needed to have something that will help him to gain the frontier knowledge for his shepherding business, so that now he will mentor his sons to do the same thing, and then now the sons can manage now the rearing of the flock. You're in your 80s, hiyo nguvu utatoa wapi uendelee kuwork until at retirement? Hey, my God, okay, God help us all. So Jacob was in that place. He desperately needed to leave so that now he could go to the land of promise as he was foretold that night when he slept at Bethel and was running away from his brother. So with that, Jacob would cultivate the consciousness he needed, so that when he would go to now let's say he's going to feed the sheep, he would know which exact trees he would use. He would know, if I have this formula here, nikiweka hii na hii, this sheep of mine will not be diseased, they will not be also suffering from some kind of a physical weakness, they'll have weak bones or something like that. So Jacob needed to have that cardiognosis right there with him all the time. He needed to be a practicing mystic, so that when he would go about his day, the ideas would just like download just like that. Okay, think about it. In, I think, verse 37 thereabouts, there's a part where he talks about his stripping the branches of the poplar, the almond, and the plane trees. So he's stripping them for a reason. He stripped them with an intention. But ask yourself, where did he get that idea from? Because I'm arguing that maybe at that time, that strategy was not known to everybody. And that is why he needed to have that particular one. That was one of the many strategies he got. That is why he started to strip the bark. Okay? He started to strip the tree trunk, so that now he was able to now use that to his advantage, along with the rearing of the sheep and the goats. And remember, when he had agreed with Laban to, now he's like, now let me go through your flock and I pick out the speckled spotted goats, that is the backs and the does, and let me pick out the spotted or streaked sheep, that is the ewes and the rams, right? He wanted the young ones, so because he knew with these ones they'll multiply and everything else. So what did Laban do? He agreed, yes, but what did Laban do? Laban went behind his back, then he told the sons, and then na hizo nini, mzichukue na mwende mbali kabisa, make sure he does. By the time he gets there, atakuwa amechoka. And then obviously when they got there, obviously there's a way they kept them there in such a way that Jacob could not get to them, and so Jacob now was left stranded all over again. You see? So I'm talking about this because I know there are people who are going through an employment situation where you're like, now I'm old, I'm almost retiring, now I've worked for this long, and this person is taking advantage of me. Every time I do something, I expect a reciprocate reward or acknowledgement, but I never seem to be anywhere near in that radar. Okay? So Jacob also went through the same thing with Laban. Okay? They would agree with Laban, hii ni mshahara ya utanilipa. The next thing, Laban is now changing the wages all over again. Why did you allow them to be stolen by the cattle thieves? Why did you allow them to be diseased? So we are going to kata your mshahara. Ni hivyo tu, maisha ni hivyo. So Jacob reached a place where he became, hey, enye, you are like, alikuwa kwa predicament ingine. He just needed God's help, God's intervention. Now, the reason I'm talking about cardiognosis is because many Christians will say, why, fast and pray and, read the Bible and confess the word, and say the affirmations and everything. But as I've said in earlier episodes, confessing the word, affirmations, chanting mantras, creating vision boards, those things don't really help. Why? Because they load your mind so much with repetitive programming, and your heart is not now sensitized enough. You become disconnected with your heart. And you see, God has a way of infusing certain ideas to your heart. He can infuse certain things cardiognostically. He can infuse certain things even through your nervous system, remember? So that when that happens, you start to now move beyond what you have studied for, or what you already know, or what is already known out there. That is why I'm talking about this cardiognosis thing, and I've been talking about from the book of Proverbs, and I'm now trying to match that with Jacob's story. Jacob needed cardiognosis badly. He needed to be in a state of heart coherence regularly, And trust you me, cultivating heart coherence when someone is taking advantage of you, that is difficult. When someone is driving you to frustration, to a place where you're like, what the hell do you want me to do? Okay? You agree with this person, you sign the contract in the office, you signed everything. Then when it comes to being rewarded, hakuna kitu kama hiyo. No, we didn't agree that. Hiyo jipange. So Jacob was in that similar situation. I want to address these things so that people who are feeling in the same predicament will gain encouragement from this story that we're talking about. So Jacob could not lean on anything that he had learned years before, leading to the time Joseph was born. Everything he did there, that thing could not work anymore. He needed to cultivate something higher, something that was more advanced, so that as he applied that, okay. Ask yourself this question: how was Jacob able to reproduce the plain goats and the plain sheep he was left with by Laban, and then he got spotted and streaked one? Ask yourself, how was he able to do that? Laban intentionally took away the spotted and speckled goats. He took away the streaked sheep intentionally. He did it intentionally because he knew, if I do that, there's nothing he'll work with. Hataweza kumultiply with anything. So Laban left him with all the plain sheep and the plain goats. Tell me, how did he get to reproduce and get the choice flock that he wanted, after Laban had now gone behind his back and then duped him? How was he able to do that? Ask yourself that question. Alifanya aje? Okay? So he needed to cultivate something. He needed to be a practicing mystic. And as he did that, as he worked alongside with his heart, as he cultivated heart coherence, he became not just a mystic for the sake of being a mystic. He was able to now get a download of now those ideas that had not been known before at that time. And then when he started to put that into his farming, when he started practicing those techniques that he was getting, now he started to multiply the choice flock that he was after. And then it multiplied until he was able to employ people, because they became so many. In the next episode, hopefully, we will be looking at the way when he was meeting with Esau, we'll see the number of animals he gave to Esau as a gift to appease him for what he did many years back. Those sheep were many. That flock was a lot. It was a percentage of what he had. You can imagine how many flocks he had by the time he was running away from Laban in secret. Okay? So, let's do a recap. We are merging the book of Proverbs and the story of Jacob, especially in that chapter, Genesis 30, verses 25 to 43. We are looking at why King Solomon is saying you need to work hard so that you can become a wealthy person. You can become an established person. Otherwise, if you sleep, poverty will attack you like an armed robber. That is what happened to Jacob those many 14 years. He was asleep until he had to learn how to wake up. And when he did, he was able to employ people. He was able to achieve something that he had never imagined he would achieve. Okay? He was able to become established until Laban's sons felt threatened around him. They were like, he has taken away our father's flock. The ones who took the choice flock he wanted and took it away 3 days away from him. You can imagine. They're feeling threatened now years later. They're like, hey, this guy he wants to finish us. He's taking away our business. He's taking away our father's business. Yes. Think about those things. I'll see you next time. Bye.